36 hours. That is how fast the new X-Mid Pro 2 sold out. 36 hours. Now, keep in mind that this is almost a $700 tint with a 7-month wait list before delivery. The only tint that sold faster was the regular X-Mid that sold out in a matter of just minutes, which makes me wonder, is this the most popular tint in the world? Let's check it out. So, first things first, let's talk about what makes this tint unique, and that is the simple but ingenious design of the X-Mid. But this isn't just an X-Mid, this is an X-Mid Pro made from Dyneema composite fabric, arguably the lightest tint material available today, which means you can get almost all the benefits of the X-Mid at half the weight, but twice the price. The question is it worth it? Well, let's take a look. But before we do, I want to say that this isn't a review. This tint was released for the first time just a couple weeks ago, and I've only had this tint a few days, not long enough to do any type of review. But just knowing how popular this tint is and how many people want to know more about it, I wanted to go ahead and put out this first impression video as quickly as I could. All this tint is a rectangle with 2 trekking poles placed off-center opposite one another. But it's so much more, because where the poles are placed create this really interesting geometry that makes for some really good steep walls. Steep walls provide more headroom on the inside as well as wind and weather resistance on the outside. But the coolest thing about it is that it only takes 4 stakes to pitch, unlike a lot of other trekking pole tints that take anywhere from 6 to as many as 12 stakes to pitch. And 4 stakes really does do it. Now, you can obviously use more stakes, and the more stakes you use, the more storm-worthy it gets. But for the most part, 4 stakes really does work pretty well and makes pitching this tint super simple. The inner sleeping area is placed diagonally between the 2 trekking poles to maximize usable space. And when you climb inside, you can really tell just how much space there is inside this thing. So right now I've got 2 25-inch wide pads inside this thing. At just 48 inches wide, the X-Mid Pro 2 isn't technically wide enough to accept 2 25-inch pads. And Durston Gear doesn't recommend that you put 2 25-inch wide pads because it might place undue pressure on the seams. Now, I'm looking at this thing and I'm not seeing anything too concerning. My biggest concern is that the pads are pushing the bathtub floor out to the point where I might get a little concerned in a heavy rain, but other than that, the X-Mid Pro seems to be able to handle it. Now, this is almost a $700 tint, so you might not want to risk busting a seam in your expensive tint. And if so, and you really don't want to give up those wide pads, Durston recommends using mummy-shaped pads. Since mummy pads are only 25 inches at their widest point, you could either sleep head to feet to accommodate 2 wide pads, or you could offset the pads just a bit to allow more room. But if I'm being honest, this feels just a little ridiculous. Why make the Pro just 2 inches shy of 2 wide pads? Why make this a concern, especially when the regular X-Mid does have a 50-inch wide floor? And maybe this shows how I'm not a diehard ultralight, because personally, I really want an ultralight tint that can accommodate 2 wide pads, even if they are heavier. Now, to the X-Mid's credit, this is the best that I have found. Now, because of the way that this thing is shaped, you have some decisions to make about how you're going to place 2 people inside it. I've heard some people say that you have to sleep head to feet in order for 2 people to fit, and that does give everyone the most headroom, but you can put 2 people facing the same direction if you want to, just one person's going to have a little bit more tint on their face. And I can guarantee you that when my wife and I sleep in this thing, this is going to be me, because have you ever smelt your feet after a long hike? That's not something I'm going to voluntarily put someone else through. One big difference between the Pro and the regular X-Mid is that the Pro is just a single wall tint that is naturally going to force you to deal with more condensation, which you might want to keep in mind if you do have 2 people and one has this tint wall to deal with. To help with condensation, the X-Mid Pro has 2 peak vents near the top of both the poles. You can prop them open with these little Velcro bars, or close them if you're expecting some serious weather. 2 things that I really appreciate about the design is the door placements. There's no poles blocking the door, and there's no guy lines extending out from the door to get hung up in. You can open the fly all the way up and have unobstructed access to the tint. The door itself hangs down from the top instead of falling onto the ground, but the only thing I don't understand is for the fly they made this really nice magnetic tie back, but for the door there are just these 2 loose elastic ties. Sort of feels like they overthought one tie back while the other one was just an afterthought. And there's only one fly tie back on this side of the door. If you want to tie back this side of the door, you have no option to do so. Now, a lot of people are probably going to stake this side down, but if you wanted to tie it back, it'd be nice to have the option to do so. Now, the biggest issue that I've had with my new X-Mid Pro is the very first time I went to take it down, I had about 2 feet of seam tape rip off the inside of the fly. I don't know if it got hung on something or if it just wasn't applied right, but right as I pulled the stake from the left-hand corner, I hear it rip off, and so I pulled out my phone to try to show you. If you remember from my Zpacks Plex solo video, I had a similar issue with the seam tape on that tint. I don't know what it is about me and expensive ultralight tints, but I seem to have problems with the seams. I've contacted Dan Durston about the seam tape, but he happens to be on a backpacking trip right now and won't be back before time to publish this video. But I'll be sure to update this video description and the comments as soon as I hear back from him, so check those for more updated information. In the meantime, I'm just gonna try to reapply the seam tape and hope that it doesn't give me any problems. Now, the last big problem with the X-Mid is its availability. Like I mentioned, this tint is currently sold out along with all of the versions of the X-Mid, but there's another batch of X-Mid 2 Pros going on sale this Monday, August the 22nd at 11 a.m. Eastern time. There's no telling how long supplies will last, so if you want one, it would be best to buy one as quickly as you can. And I'm told that supply is supposed to stabilize in 2023 when Durston hopes to have enough stock to keep up with demand. So if you really want an X-Mid but so far have been out of luck, keep trying and eventually you should be able to buy one. Until then, if you want a really good ultralight tint that also happens to be the lightest tint on the market today, check out this video all about the Zpacks Plex Solo. Be sure to like, subscribe, and do all those other things, and as always, thanks for watching. This is an awkward position. How should I talk to you while laying in the tent like this? Should I put my hands like this? Or should I put my hands like this? Is this a little bit too swimsuit calendar for you?